Good morning, everybody. So today we're going to do a short workout. It's 30 minutes, but it's going to be all focused on abs. So if you want to get whatever equipment you need, go ahead and get it handy. And let's start with a little bit of kettlebell marching. So if you have kettlebells, if you have dumbbells, whatever it is, go ahead and let's pull those out. I lied, just pull one of those out. When we do today's ab work and we start working on marches and squats, we're going to do our normal kind of thing, but we're going to do it with one weight this time. And the reason we're doing that is because that's going to stress our abs a little bit differently. If we only have one weight, then the abs are going to have to work harder to keep us from tipping. So that's why we're going to do that kind of work with our sets today. So let's go ahead and grab your weight, come up tall, and let's go ahead and just start marching. Bringing the knees up nice and high, floating them a little bit wide without going too wide, and just really drive length into the floor with your other leg. Good, perfect. Driving the knees long through the middle, making sure that the hips are driving in front of the ankles with each step. We don't want our hips to be back. We want to be charging forward. Now let's switch hands. Keep going. Driving that length. Using the other arm to reach towards the floor to help. And let's go ahead and we're going to switch it back to our other arm now, but we're going to bring our feet to a rest. And now let's go through some squats. So whichever hand it's in, make sure that there's never space between your kettlebell or bell and your leg. We want to push our knees wide and then come up tall, making sure we're pushing that length out of our groin and pushing our hips forward and into that nice long space. Hips go back and then they go up. Make sure you're 5 feet away from the floor as you come back up. Let's go one more and then we're going to switch sides. Again, feel that instinctively your abs are working to make sure that you're not tipping to the side. You never want to feel like you're tipping away from the weight. You're anchoring towards the floor with those abdominals. You're using that other arm to reach through to keep that energy going. Let's go one last one. And let's go ahead now. We're going to go into another set of marches. But this time, let's drop down to a little bit lighter weight. If you're using a kettlebell, then you make sure you don't have any wrist bling on. And so what we're going to do on this march, really important to note that we have our wrist in a good position like this. Never let our wrist buckle here. Never let our wrist crunch over there. We want this middle knuckle driving towards the ceiling as our arm stays loose and we feel like we're holding that weight with our abs and our armpit muscles. Good. Drive length through the floor with your foot with each step down. Use that other arm to reach, but make sure it's centering into your obliques. Good. Let's go ahead and switch arms. Double check. Oops. Rookie mistake. I didn't turn my watch around. Make sure that you've got your wrist in a good position as you transfer to the other side. There may be some discomfort in this on your wrist, but it's okay. It's not going to kill you. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger. We need to toughen that space up and not buckle our wrist to stay away from it. And let's go ahead and rest your feet. Switch back over to the first arm. And let's bring that weight back up. Establish a good wrist position. And now we're going to do our squats. Knees are drifting wide, but our feet stay on the floor. We don't want our toes peeking up. No heels peeking up. The only thing that comes off the floor during these squats when your knees go wide should be your arches. One more. And let's go ahead and switch. Same thing, using that other arm that's not holding the bell to keep energy through this side even though my abs are working. Good. Knees drifting wide, arches lifting, toes relaxed. 2 more. Keep that arm nice and loose and imagine your abs are holding it. And then let's go ahead and come on down. And for our last one, we're going to do this one with one weight in your hand again. And if you need to go even a little lighter, that's perfectly fine. If you have been working with me in the past, or you can handle a bottoms up position, you're more than welcome to hold it here. I'm going to hold it here today. But again, make sure your wrist is straight. And when you do your bottoms up position, make sure that it's a balancing thing with your elbow. You cannot grip it with your hand and put your wrist into that position. We want to see that nice straightness as you're balancing it, like somebody would be balancing a stick on their finger. All right, so let's go ahead. Last is my in the air, and let's march it out. Sorry you can't see mine right now, but the palm should be facing forward. The elbow should be locked, and your shoulder blade and ribs should be anchored to the floor so that they're not holding too high. Beautiful. Drive length through the hips. Make sure those hips are in front of the ankle bones. And let's bring that weight down into our armpit, and then switch hands. Bring it up. Palm forward, elbow locked, ribs and shoulder blade anchored down. Toes lifting up on the march. Make sure your march is bringing your feet forward and you're not doing this. We need to bring those toes up in front of us as we drive length into the floor. And let's go ahead and relax, bring it down. And we've got our squats next. So last set. And on this, make sure that your focus remains on your abs feeling tension and your hips opening and closing. So as we go down, our hips open and then push to come up. Open hips, then push the hips. Push the hips from the floor, open them as you go down. Keep that other arm reaching towards the hips. One more. Make sure you're not looking up at the bottom. A lot of times people are instructed to look up. We need to make sure we're staying neutral. We do want to stay elevated in our chest, but we don't want our chin to pull us back into our heels. So let's go for other side. Same strong wrist, no bend. Feel like you're holding the weight with your abs. Take your arm out of it a little bit without dropping the weight any lower. 3, 2, and go ahead and rest your weight down to the floor. Grab a little drink of water. We're going to make our way down to the mat next. And so we're going to do a plank set. So if you're new to planks, or if you're using a chair or a counter to plank from right now, that's fine. Hardest thing you do well. So if you want to use the chair or the counter, make sure that your focus is on stability and it's not on your neck and your shoulders. If you feel this in your neck and your shoulders, then we want to make it a little easier by going higher. Okay? An elbow plank, and we're going to do a saw plank where we're going to stretch out our toes a little bit as we're doing this one. So let's go ahead and go down first to your hands and knees with your butt up in the air. I want you to really kind of stick your butt up and out towards the ceiling and look between your elbows to establish a neutral spine. Now before we go into this, I want you to push your chin away from the floor by tucking it in slightly, and feel that we don't want to be doing a plank with our head falling into Never Never Land. Make sure the first step into the plank is always pushing the chin and the chest away from the floor. Now step out into your plank. And as we do the saw plank, let's make sure you have clear space. As we do the saw plank, you're pushing yourself back into a stretch on your toes, and then you're just bouncing forward. And you're pushing back and you're bouncing forward. And you're not trying to hold tension in your toes around this. You're trying to release the tension out of your toes as you push your chest and your chin away from the floor, and then just bounce back. So just keep that energy through your upper body, pushing away from the floor so we don't get lazy there. And keep driving length through the middle of your groins all the way out to your ankle bones. Keep your knees straight and your hips straight. Let's go 3, 2, and stick your knees back under you, stick your butt out, and then sit back into whatever comfortable position that you have. If that means that you're on a block or maybe you're in a shin box, I'm not going to do a shin box assessment today, although I think it probably would be nice to try. So if in your sitting you do go to shin box, try both sides and see that even though we're not even focused on hips today, the abs might actually release you into a better shin box. So the next thing we're going to do is an ab set. And don't, just to make sure that I address everybody's question, planks are abs. When people say, oh, what abs do I have to do? It's almost always going to start with some planks. So make sure that you're really challenging those planks to get those abs engaged. If all you do is feel in your shoulders and your neck, we need to come higher and make it more ab driven. So for our first ab set, I want to do the one where you're laying down, you don't need any props. You could use a head support if you wanted to, but you don't need a wedge, you don't need anything for your feet to rest on. And so you're just going to lay down, put one leg long, one knee's bent, both legs are just kind of relaxed out of the midline. Bring your hands up behind your head, and now bring your elbows in close, not so that you're pulling on your head, but just so that you've got, your arms are wide. When your arms are too wide, it gets you put more tension into your neck and your upper body. So let's bring those elbows in, pull your shoulders away from your ears and your ribs away from your ears to lift your shoulder blades off the ground. And so now that we're in this little crunch and hold, establish that your chin is loosely tucked in and that your neck is long, but your head is just resting in your hands. You are not pulling on your head in any way during this. As I try to go higher, it's going to come from my abs and my shoulders pulling away from my ears, not on my head pulling from my hands. So just keep trying to think about that little notch at the back of your skull. Think about that, trying to reach up the wall behind you a little bit higher and feel how the abs have to hold that. Now let's switch legs, and now let's give me some little pulses here. Pulsing up in that top position, and now hold. The pulses actually become easy, so we have to then hold at the top. And then give me 3 more little pulses. Shoulders pulling away from the ears. Head nice and loose, just resting in the hands, no pulling. 5, 4, 3, 2, and rest down. Those are great to kind of get those upper abs firing up. You're using your lower abs too, guys. Don't that if you're not crunching up from the bottom, you're not getting your lower abs. That's the worst thing you can do in a sit-up. So just make sure that you're never using your pelvis tucked under, because that puts your spine in a reverse bend right there, and we don't need to teach our abs to fire like that. We want to always make sure that our hips are relaxed and loose, and that we're not creating any flatness of the back on the floor. We always want to have a little teeny space or a little feeling of lightness in that middle of your back, the middle of your lower back. All right, so our next one that we're going to do is a side plank. So let's go ahead and turn on to the side. Bend both knees, cock your feet. If you're not sure if you're in the right position, put your hands straight down past your butt. You should be pointing at your heels. If you're not, stick your butt out and reposition things. Just make sure you're never tucked under as you're trying to find your position. All right, first things first, we want to get out of a lazy shoulder, and we want to imagine that somebody's hand is underneath our chest or the side of our ribs, and we have to push into the floor to get that to activate. Now, drive your hips long and forward without putting any height to them. We don't need them to go up high. We just need them to push forward towards the hand in front of you, or the imaginary hand. Now imagine there's a hand in front of your chest. Push away from that too. Feel how your upper abs just came in. Now, a lot of people will get cramps in the back of their legs on this one, so make sure you're not pulling your feet up towards you to get your hips forward. Leave those knees nice and loosely bent. Open up your knees just a ½ inch, and imagine that you're driving length from your groin to the middle of your knees, and let the knee tension in the back release, and usually those hamstrings will calm down. So now what we're going to do is a couple pushbacks. So what I want you to do is imagine that there's a ball right up here above you. And what I want you to do is push from your elbow to try and stick your bottom hip butt cheek up towards that ball, And then drive out of the elbow to push your hip back into that loose bent knee position. Same thing, keep the knees loosely bent as you're pushing your butt away from your elbow towards that ball, and then swiveling and pushing out of that knee or pushing out of that elbow to drive length this way. Avoid pushing into the floor or this will happen. Drive your knees long and wide. So now let's go ahead and push your butt back and relax. Yes, I know that was a long set. Let's go ahead and flip it to the other side. Same thing on setup. You can be a little lazy in your shoulder to start. Just make sure your knees and your hips and your feet are stacked. And then put your hand down. Make sure that your finger's pointing at your heels. And now let's go ahead and push away from that lazy shoulder to get the chest up and everything away from the floor. And now drive those hips forward, keeping the knees loosely bent, slightly apart, so that you can feel that length coming out of the groin to get that hip forward. A lot of times people will be pinching their knees and I'll tell them to push their hips forward. It's impossible to get your hips forward if you're pinching your knees together. So make sure that you're almost imagining you're trying to space your groin a finger apart as you push length through those loosely bent knees. And so now let's go ahead and push your left butt cheek or your bottom butt cheek away from the floor towards that ball. And now push out of the elbow to drive your hip forward again. When we push out of the elbow, we want to feel how that makes our abs drive our butt back and up. So this is an activation for our abs, but it's also a great mobilizer for our hips. Keep the floating knee loosely bent. Don't let it do something funky. And now let's go ahead and push your butt back and relax. Beautiful. So we're going to lay on our back again. This time, you'll need your wedge, which unfortunately I don't have. So I'm going to kind of use something that functions like it or is a little substitute for it. But you want a wedge, a head support, and a band for this one. So something of your band, it shouldn't be really, really strong, but it also shouldn't be really, really light. Something in the middle. And so let's go ahead and lay down. Find your head onto whatever head support feels good for you. The less, the better. We don't need a ton of head support. We don't want to cock our neck up like this if we don't have to. But if we feel like when we let our head rest on the floor, it's like hanging off a cliff, then we certainly need a head support. So, put your wedge under. Find your position of your legs that feels good. Now, if you want to just do your legs on the floor and do this action, that is perfectly fine for the beginner. As you progress, we can work into the hovered leg, working into the length. But make sure you're doing the hardest thing you do well. If you feel your back pulling off the ground, then you need to make it a little easier. All right, so let's put the band on your wrists and float your feet up. And now as your arms go overhead, one leg lengthens out, and then everything comes back up together. Overhead, lengthen out, back up together. If there were a hand right on top of your chest, right hovering on top of your chest, I want you to imagine pushing your ribs away from that hand into the floor as you extend your legs long. Make sure that the knee lengthens out before the drop of the leg. We want to lengthen and then drop. We don't want to go out to the length with the knee bent because that usually puts too much stress into that low back and allows it to peek off the floor. So just keep remembering, we want to keep that rib cage anchored, but keep the hips loose. Let's go 2 more. Feeling what range you can get your arms to where the elbows don't bend and the ribs don't pop. And go ahead and relax. Move your wedge, move your bands. All right, so what we're going to do next is we're going to do a kneeling ab set. And so for this one, you need to have tension on a band pulling from the side. So I know that not everybody has that handy. So if this is not something that you have today to be able to do this next exercise, then I'd like you to go down to the position you were just in, and you're going to do a couple more sets. You can either use a weight above your head, you can use the bands again, you could do no bands, you could even do that one leg down and one leg up crunch again. If you don't have this as a piece of equipment, resort to one of those other ones real quick. And so what we're going to do on this one, mats make things so much more comfortable. So when you're doing this one, make sure your back toes are tucked under and you're on the pads of your feet. I don't want your feet flat with your toenails on the ground. I want your toe pads under. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to grab the band, and you can either grab the band like this, or if it's perfectly at the right distance, you could do it there. But because mine's not perfect, I'm just going to choke up on it to find where it needs to be. I need to have my hips perfectly square forward while it's perpendicular to the band, meaning no rotation open, no rotation out that way. Hips straight forward. And now I want you to bring that band forward and back from your chest. It should not deviate from the middle of your body at all, and I'm going to kind of face straight onto you, and you can see the goal is to keep that right in the middle. And you should feel that there should be some tension on the band, making your abs have to work to make sure that you're not letting your body come apart. Another cue that really helps with this one, two more cues, is driving the middle of the kneecap, that middle edge of the kneecap, drive that into the floor as your shoulders pull away from the push. Meaning as my hands go forward, my shoulders are pulling backwards, my ribs are anchoring down, and that helps me feel this much better. So that's the focus here. Make sure your front knee is not pinching across. It should be out to the side, loose, with no part of your foot lifting off the ground. Let's go two more. Whew. And then we're going to switch sides. I'm going to turn around, and we're going to go on the other leg. And so again, make sure that toe is tucked under. Make sure you're square away from your band. And now drive it straight forward, straight back, pushing length through the middle of your hip, down through the middle of your kneecap, tight in your shoulders, pulling away from the band, and your abs anchoring to the floor, along with those hips driving, or that right hip driving long into the knee. Good. Pushing length out of the floor with that down leg. Give me two more. And relax. So, Palloff press is a great addition. You can always make that a little harder just by walking your foot more medial. But just remember, we always want to keep the knee a little bit out. As we go in, we never want to pinch to create. Okay? So, last thing for our abs before we do one last thing, one last finisher. So, for the last ab exercise, let's go ahead and we're going to do the weighted abs. So find your head support again. You want a weight of your choice to hold above your head. When picking your weight for this one, guys, make sure as you that it's something kind of heavy. If your body doesn't use it as, or think of it as a challenge, if it doesn't think of it like, oh wow, this is scary, then it's probably not going to activate enough. But that also means we have to be super careful in how we pick things up when we're using those challenging weights for ourselves, right? So just remember, when we're grabbing the weight and when we're using it, we always want to make sure that the weight is in a place where we can put our hands on it in the exact position we want it to be when we go up. So put your hands, middle finger, or finger, index finger and thumb around the horn, the rest on the bell. And now with your hips and your shoulders facing the bell, we're just going to bicep curl that weight up, and we're going to use our arm as a little bit of an anchor as we roll our whole body back together. We never want to set it down without letting our hips follow, or vice versa, because if the hips and the shoulders are facing the same direction, then we're not rotating through the spine, making less likelihood for injury. The other thing is, I always tell people never to let the weight rest on your body. If you're not, like when we were waiting for me to talk, hang over to the side and let your arm at your elbow just kind of hold your weight. But please don't ever let it set on your body. And so as we come up, we're going to put it up straight towards the ceiling. We're going to feel our shoulder blades pull away from the weight and into the floor, and we're going to feel our ribs anchor onto the floor as well. Float your legs into their position, and now let's go ahead and go for some alternating leg lengthening. Make sure your ribs are staying anchored and you're focusing on the length coming out of the knee before the action of the leg dropping towards the floor. Feel the hips nice and relaxed. Feel the abs working. Feel the shoulders pushing that weight away, but equally pulling themselves into the floor. Feeling that every exhale we make should rib crunch or drive our upper abs into the floor without flattening our back. Let's go for 5, 4, 3, and now, if you need a rest, you can put the weight down, and if you're going to do that, then put the elbow on the floor, turn everything over, and rest. If you'd like to add another set, then either with or without the weight, put your arms up. And now bring the weight down if you've got the weight down, and then push it up as you lengthen a leg. Push it up as you lengthen the other leg. Drive the shoulders down into the floor as you push that weight up to make sure that you're really engaging those lats and abs, and you're not holding tension in your shoulders or your wrists. I want you to assess that your hands are just holding the bell and there's nice long length through your wrists, and you don't feel your wrists trying to grip the bell too hard. Let's go one more on each leg. And then let's go ahead and put your feet down. Roll over onto your back. All right, so last thing. Sorry if it seems like there's been some connection blips today, and I apologize, but hopefully they've been all this short. But what I want to do on this last one is an extension. So I want you to lay down, same thing, light head support or no head support, whatever feels most comfortable. Sometimes people feel better with their feet up on top of a block or a chair, or maybe a stool, maybe not a chair, but having their feet up a little bit raised on something sometimes feels good for people who might not have a lot of comfort laying on their back. But get yourself into a very comfortable position on your back. I want you to let your arms rest out to the side, and they can be anywhere. They could be up at a T, they could be down by your side, but let's avoid going up over your shoulders for right now. And so we're going to do an extension here. So with your hands resting on the floor and never lifting off, I want you to reach through your middle fingers, drive your shoulders away from your ears, tuck your chin in and try and pull it away from an imaginary bucket of slugs in front of your face. Engage your abs and push your ribs into the floor. Reach through your heels, through the middle of your knees, feeling that length generating from the middle of your groin. Reach the toes towards your face as you feel your quads starting to burn. Reach through your fingertips and shoulders away from your ears, opening the chest and bringing down the ribs as you breathe. 3, 2, and melt into the mat. Relax, wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, roll your wrists, roll your ankles. And I want you to resituate your hands. Bring them slightly to a different position, so maybe they're higher, maybe they're lower. Maybe this time you go overhead. But if you do go overhead, remember that the arm may be going this way, but the shoulder blade needs to be anchoring down away from the reach of the arm. So don't get into your shoulder up on your ear, okay? All right, so whatever arm position you're going to be in, if you have the space, go ahead and find that. And now reach through your middle fingers, reach your ears away from your shoulders as your chin tucks away from those slugs. Reach your heels long, pull your toes up towards your face, reach through the middle of your groin, reach your hands towards your feet, open the chest but bring the ribs down so you don't pop your back off the ground. Breathe. 5, 4, reaching, 2, and melt into the mat and relax. Wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, roll your wrists, roll your ankles. Bend your elbows, bend your knees. Do a little bit of wiggling. Roll your shoulders. Reposition your hips a little bit. And now take your hands, rub them together, create a little friction and warmth, and wash your face, come back to the present. Thanks for joining me today, guys. Hope this was a good ab workout for you. Yes, I will have it in the recordings on the IGTV so that you can look at it for future reference. But enjoy your day and have a great weekend. Bye.